Constantinople, 1477. The head arrives preserved in honey features, still recognizable despite the journey from distant battlefields. Sultan
Noble
Mehmed II,
assembly,
conqueror
we gather
of the
to
legendary
affirm our
walls, stands
bonds
alone
and
in his
chart
private
our
chamber,
course.
staring
We
at what
stand
remains
ready.
of the only man who ever made him retreat.
Soldiers!
The face is smaller than he
The hour
remembers.
upon us.
Death does
March
that.
with courage.
Strips
and
away the
victory
mythology,
will be
leaves only
ours.
flesh and bone. But those eyes, even clouded now, still hold something. A question maybe, or an accusation. Mehmed signals for his attendants to leave. What he has to say, he will say to the dead. Because the dead, unlike the living, cannot judge. They can only listen. Let me tell you a story.
Noble
Mehmed begins his voice low, almost conversational. Let me tell you about the only man who learned our lessons too well. The year is 1442. An 11-year-old boy stands in his father's throne room in Wallachia, watching men in turbans negotiate with his father. The boy does not understand the words yet, but he understands the weight of them. He sees his father count silver coins. He sees the Ottoman envoys gesture toward him and his younger brother Radu. Then his father speaks his name, and the world changes. The boy who will become Dracula does not cry when they bind his hands. He does not scream when they load him onto the cart next to Radu, who is 12 and sobbing. He watches his father's face, memorizing it. The way a man looks when he trades his sons for peace. The way weakness wears a crown. The last thing young Vlad sees before the gates close is his father turning away. That image will live in him forever, a seed of ice in his chest that will never melt, never warm, only grow. The journey to the Ottoman citadel at Amasya takes weeks. Radu cries himself to sleep most nights. Vlad lies awake counting stars through the wagon slats, calculating distances, memorizing landmarks. Already his mind works like a blade cutting away everything soft, keeping only what is useful. When they arrive at the fortress, a boy only slightly older than Vlad approaches them. He wears fine clothes, but his eyes are hard-aged beyond his 10 years. This is Mehmed, son of Sultan Murad II, and he too is a prisoner of sorts, a prince raised under the constant threat of his own father's displeasure. "You will sleep here," young Mehmed says in careful, formal Wallachian. "You will study here. You will learn our ways. And if your father disobeys, you will die here." Vlad meets his eyes without flinching. And if we learn well enough, if we become more useful alive than dead. Mehmed smiles for the first time. It is not a kind smile. It is the smile of recognition. One strategic mind identifying another. "Then maybe you survive," Mehmed replies. That night in the cold stone chamber that will be their home for years, Radu turns to his brother. His face is swollen from crying. "What will happen to us?" Vlad does not comfort him with lies. "We will become something else, something they can use, or we will become nothing at all." "I am scared, brother." "Good," Vlad says, staring at the ceiling. "Fear is information. Remember everything that frightens you. Someday we will use it." The next morning brings their first true lesson. Though it is not taught in any classroom, a janissary has attempted to desert. The punishment is swift, public, and precisely calculated. They are ordered to watch along with hundreds of others. The man is stripped-bound, and a long wooden stake is prepared with almost ceremonial care. Rounded at the tip, oiled for easier penetration, angled just so, Vlad watches everything: the preparation, the positioning, the choice of location at a crossroads where 3 trade routes meet. When the stake is driven home, and the man is hoisted upright, his screams carrying across the courtyard, Vlad does not look away. He studies the geometry of it, the visibility, the duration of suffering. An Ottoman instructor stands near Mehmed, explaining in a voice meant to teach. "One death positioned correctly governs 1,000 miles. Fear is not chaos, young prince. Fear is architecture." Vlad absorbs every word like a student taking notes. This is not cruelty. This is communication. This is power made visible. The months become years. They study philosophy, astronomy, languages, the art of calligraphy. They learn horsemanship, swordsmanship, the mathematics of siege warfare. But the deepest lessons come from observation. Watching how the Ottomans handle rebellion among their elite janissary corps. Watching what happens to towns that refuse tribute. Watching how pain strategically deployed can govern vast distances without ever raising another sword. Radu adapts by surrendering. He learns Arabic studies. The Quran embraces Islam with what appears to be genuine devotion. The court adores him. He becomes Ottoman in everything but blood, perhaps even in that. He smiles easily, laughs at their jokes, becomes one of them. Vlad travels a different path. He learns everything they teach, but he does not assimilate. He catalogs. He watches them the way a prisoner studies his jailer's routines, memorizing weaknesses, blind spots, patterns. Every lesson in Ottoman strength becomes a lesson in Ottoman vulnerability. 5 years pass. Vlad is now 16, Radu 17, Mehmed 15. They have become something like brothers, the three of them. United by captivity, by the understanding that princes are never truly free, only useful. They play chess in the evenings. Mehmed favors aggressive openings, overwhelming force applied quickly. Vlad plays defensive formations that seem weak until suddenly they are not, until pieces that appear trapped become predators. One night, Mehmed studies the board after another loss. "You would make a fine Ottoman general." "No," Vlad replies. "I would make a terrible Ottoman general, because I would always be thinking about how to defeat Ottomans." Mehmed laughs. It is genuine. "This is why I like you, Wallachian. You are honest about your hatred. Radu pretends to love us. You do not pretend anything." "Hate is too simple," Vlad says, resetting the pieces. "I respect you. I learn from you. But I will never serve you." "Then what will you do?" "I will become what you taught me to fear." The words hang between them, both threat and promise. Mehmed should be offended. Instead, he nods slowly. "Good. The world needs worthy enemies. Servants are cheap. Adversaries who make you sharper, they are valuable." Then news arrives that shatters whatever remained of Vlad's old life. His father has been assassinated. His older brother Mircea has been buried alive by Wallachian nobles, the boyars who serve whoever offers them the most gold. The throne of Wallachia is empty, and the Ottoman Empire is deciding who will fill it. Vlad receives this news without visible emotion. Radu tries to embrace him, offer comfort. Vlad shrugs him off gently. "Do not mourn them," Vlad says. "Son, study what happened. The boyars who killed our father and brother, they are the same boyars who sit on councils now, the same ones who bow to the Sultan. Learn their names, remember them." "For what?" Radu asks. "Revenge." "For efficiency," Vlad corrects. "Revenge is emotional. What I am planning is structural." Later, he seeks out Mehmed in private. "In your faith, how do you deal with betrayal?" Mehmed considers the question seriously. "You do not just punish the traitor. You erase the idea of betrayal itself. You make the cost so absolute that the thought never occurs to others. And this works. Our empire has stood for centuries, so yes, it works." Vlad nods slowly, filing this away with all his other lessons. Sultan Murad makes his decision in 1448. Vlad, now 17, will be released and installed as voivode of Wallachia, not out of mercy, out of calculation. A puppet prince, young and presumably malleable, bound by gratitude and the memory of Ottoman power. On the day of his departure, Vlad stands before Mehmed one final time. The young Ottoman prince is now 15, already showing signs of the conqueror he will become. "You could stay," Mehmed offers. "Convert like your brother. You have a mind I could use." "I have a mind you should fear," Vlad replies. "Then I look forward to testing it against mine." They grip forearms the way warriors do. When they release, both know the next time they face each other, it will be as enemies. Vlad's first reign lasts exactly 2 months. The boyars who pledge loyalty turn on him the moment a stronger candidate appears. He is driven out, forced to flee into exile, his throne taken by men who see princes as interchangeable pieces on their board of power. He spends the next 8 years in the wilderness learning patience, gathering allies waiting. In 1456, at age 25, with Hungarian support and a small loyal force, he returns to Wallachia. This time he sees his homeland with new eyes, not as a prince reclaiming his birthright, but as a surgeon examining a diseased body. Wallachia is caught between two empires, Ottoman to the south, Hungarian to the north, squeezed by both, bled by both. The boyars play both sides, enriching themselves while the common people starve. Lawlessness is epidemic. The roads are controlled by bandits. Tax collection is a negotiation, not a law. Vlad conducts a systematic assessment, military style. Army strength, 5,000 men poorly trained. Economic capacity crippled by corruption. Social cohesion non-existent. Political loyalty a commodity sold to the highest bidder. His conclusion is surgical and cold. You cannot build a nation on a rotten foundation. You must demolish first, completely, without mercy. A peasant woman approaches him one day in the street. Her name is Maria. Her husband was killed by boyar guards who took 3 times the legal tax and murdered him when he could not pay. "What do you want from me?" Vlad asks her. "We do not need another prince, my lord. We need a blade, something sharp enough to cut out the rot." Vlad studies her weathered face, her hard eyes. "Then that is what I will become." Easter Sunday, 1459. Vlad, now 28, invites every boyar family to a lavish feast at the palace in Targovishte. The hall is decorated with silk and gold. Spiced wine flows freely. Musicians play. The nobles arrive in their finest clothes, jewels glittering, already half drunk on their own importance. They toast their young prince. They make jokes about his time in captivity, how the Turks tamed him, how he has learned his place. They do not see the way he watches them, the way a man studies insects before crushing them. Vlad stands as the final course is served. The hall gradually quiets. He begins to speak, his voice calm, almost gentle. "I have a question for you all, a simple question. How many princes of Wallachia have died in the last 50 years? Nervous laughter. Someone calls out a number. And how many of you in this room participated in killing them? The laughter dies. Understanding begins to dawn on the smarter ones. They look toward the doors. The doors are already locked. Armed men step from the shadows. These are not palace guards. These are men loyal to Vlad personally. Men from his years in exile. Men who know what needs to be done. What happens next is not massacre. It is surgery. Vlad has spent months preparing. He knows which boyars personally murdered his father. He knows which ones buried his brother alive. He knows the entire web of complicity, documented, verified, cross-referenced. The men directly responsible are taken first. They are marched outside to the courtyard where stakes have been prepared. Tall, rounded, oiled. The same design Vlad witnessed as a boy in the Ottoman citadel. He has refined it, improved it. The angle is precise, calculated to avoid immediate death, to maximize duration, to create the exact visual effect he needs. As the first screams begin, the remaining boyars are dragged forward. Not to be killed, not yet, to witness, to understand what their world has become. When dawn breaks, 200 boyar families have been processed. The patriarchs are dead, displayed along the main roads leading into the capital. But the families, the wives, the daughters, the children, they are bound and marched toward the mountains. Among them is Countess Elena, 40 years old, widow of one of the chief conspirators. She still wears her Easter silks, now torn and filthy. When she sees where they are being taken, she tries to speak to Vlad directly. "We are women, we are not warriors. We are not responsible for what our men did." Vlad looks at her without emotion. "You lived in luxury purchased with my father's blood. You raised sons who would have continued the cycle. You are not innocent, you are complicit. And now you will serve. Serve how? By building. The fortress of Panari rises on a mountain peak accessible only by a brutal ascent. It has stood half-ruined for decades. Vlad orders it rebuilt, not by hired laborers, by the boyar families. 200 noble women and their children, stripped of titles and privileges, forced to haul stone up impossible slopes. Fine dresses disintegrate into rags. Hands that never touch rough work crack open, bleed, develop calluses that split and bleed again. Many collapse and do not rise. Those who survive emerge transformed, no longer nobility, just bodies that serve a function. The message is absolute and calculated. In Vlad's Wallachia, there are no sacred categories, no class protections, no gender immunity. You are useful or you are material. Those are the only options. Within 3 months, the fortress is complete. The surviving women are released, broken things returning to a world that no longer has a place for them. But they spread the story. Noble-born women worked like slaves. Their daughters carried stone until their backs broke. And no one intervened. Vlad institutes his domestic order with the same precision. A golden cup is placed at a public fountain available for anyone to use. It remains there for years untouched by theft because every person in Wallachia understands the alternative. A peasant woman named Anna uses the cup one day without permission. She is reported immediately. Vlad gives her a choice: confess and receive a quick death, deny and face prolonged interrogation to prove her honesty. Anna confesses, terrified of torture. Vlad orders her impaled, but the stake is positioned for rapid death minutes instead of hours. Honesty deserves mercy and method, he explains to his council. The terror must be logical, not random. People must understand that cooperation reduces suffering. This is not cruelty. This is communication. But the logic has limits, and those limits are defined entirely by Vlad's judgment of utility. A peasant woman named Ilona sews a poor shirt for her husband. Vlad sees it during an inspection of the villages. The garment is raggedly made, the stitching uneven. "Why is your husband dressed like a beggar?" Vlad asks her. Ilona explains that she works in the fields all day, has little time for sewing, does her best with what hours remain. "Your time is not your own," Vlad tells her. "Your function is to clothe your family properly. If you cannot fulfill your function, you are defective." The punishment is surgical in its precision. Both
Noble
thumbs
assembly,
severed.
we
Now
gather
she
to
cannot sew
affirm
at
our
all,
bonds
and everyone
and
who
chart
sees
our
her maimed
course.
hands
We
understands the
stand
price of
ready.
inadequacy. She is left alive, turned into
Soldiers!
a walking lesson.
The hour upon
Another
us.
woman, a widow
March
named
with
Sophia,
courage,
is heard
and
laughing with
victory
friends
will
3
be
days after
ours.
her husband's burial. A neighbor reports this to authorities. Vlad summons her. "Do you miss your husband?" "Of course, my lord, but grief does not mean I stop living." "Then let us examine your heart. Let us see if it truly mourned." He orders her chest opened in public. It is not an execution as much as a demonstration.
Noble thy
The
siege,
body
your
is a text to be
butler!
read. The heart a
Losing me
document to
now,
be examined for
Lord,
truth. When she dies
strong!
screaming, Vlad shows no emotion. "Deception is rot," he tells the assembled crowd. "I cut it out wherever it hides, even in the heart." The roads become safe, crime disappears, tax collection reaches 95% efficiency. Foreign merchants report that Wallachia, for the first time in living memory, is orderly, but it is the order of a graveyard. No one dares disobey because disobedience has become synonymous with death, and not quick death, but death designed as theater. In 1461, Ottoman envoys arrive at Vlad's court. They carry the annual demand: gold grain cattle and 500 Christian boys to be trained as janissaries. The tribute Wallachia has paid for decades. Vlad, now 30 years old, has been expecting this, preparing for it. He sits on his throne and listens to their demands with no expression. When they finish, he responds in perfect Turkish, the language of his captivity. "No." The word hangs in the air. The envoys glance at each other. Perhaps they misheard. "Wallachia will no longer bleed for Constantinople," Vlad continues. "No gold, no grain, and certainly no children. The Sultan will not accept this refusal." "Good. Tell him to come personally. I have learned much since we were boys together. I would enjoy showing him what I learned." The envoys, following their religious tradition, keep their turbans on their heads throughout the meeting. They will not remove them, not even for a foreign prince. Vlad understands. This is their faith, their identity. "If your customs prevent you from showing respect in my house," Vlad says quietly, "then let me make those customs permanent." Iron nails are brought. The turbans are nailed to the skulls wearing them. The fabric and bone become one. The envoys die screaming, but they die with their traditions intact, literally embedded in their flesh. Their bodies are sent back to Constantinople with a message. This is how Vlad honors customs. This is how he respects tradition. And this is how he answers demands. In Constantinople, Mehmed II, now 29 years old, receives the bodies and the message. He is sitting in the same palace where he grew up alongside Vlad. He is the conqueror of Constantinople, breaker of the legendary walls, the man who accomplished what Ottoman sultans had attempted for centuries. And yet, staring at the mutilated envoys, he feels something he has not felt since childhood: unease. "He learned too well from us," Mehmed tells his Grand Vizier. "Then we crush him, my sultan. 80,000 men. We will reduce Wallachia to ashes." Mehmed shakes his head slowly. "No, this is not some fool acting from rage. This is a man who wants us to come, who is prepared for us, who has been preparing for years." "Then what do? We give him what he wants. We come. But carefully, very carefully, Vlad does not wait for the invasion. In December 1461, when the Danube freezes solid, he crosses with 10,000 men and attacks Ottoman territory first. This is not a campaign of conquest or glory. This is a campaign of trauma implantation. Village after village is reduced to ash, not just military targets. Everything. Men, women, children, the elderly, livestock, even was. Nothing survives. The destruction is total, systematic, documented. Vlad keeps records. 23,884 killed. The numbers are precise because precision matters. This is not rage, this is engineering. In one village, an Ottoman woman named Ayşe holds her 3-year-old daughter and begs for mercy. She speaks in Turkish, the language Vlad learned as a boy. She calls him by his childhood name, the one Mehmed used, as if invoking their shared past might save her. Vlad looks into her eyes for a long moment. Then he signals to his men. Mother and daughter are impaled on the same stake, positioned where the next wave of Ottoman troops will find them. Vlad watches until it is done, memorizing every detail. The angle of the stake, the positioning of the bodies, the sight lines from various approaches. This is not sadism. This is data collection. He is testing methodologies, refining techniques, building a language of fear that will speak directly to the Ottoman army coming for him. By the time he withdraws back across the Danube, he has killed nearly 24,000 people and left their bodies arranged like breadcrumbs leading back to Wallachia. He wants the Ottomans to follow. He needs them to follow. Because the real weapon is not the killing. The real weapon is what comes after. Spring 1462. Mehmed mobilizes his army. 80,000 men, the largest military force on the planet, artillery trains, supply wagons stretching for miles, siege engineers, elite Janissary Corps. This is not a punitive raid. This is a campaign of erasure. Vlad knows exactly what is coming. He spent his childhood inside this machine. He knows its capabilities, its logistics, its psychology. And he knows he cannot defeat it through conventional warfare. 8-to-1 odds, no allies, no relief force. In a straight battle, Wallachia ceases to exist within hours. So he prepares a different kind of war. He orders every village in the Ottoman army's path evacuated, forcibly. Families are dragged from homes. Those who resist are killed as examples. The crops are burned, the wells poisoned with animal carcasses and lime. Roads are destroyed, bridges collapsed. Every structure along the invasion route is reduced to charcoal and ash. Maria, the peasant woman from years before, confronts him. She has become something of a local voice, someone the people trust. You are destroying us to save us. How is this different from what the Ottomans would do? The Ottomans would leave you alive as slaves, Vlad replies. I leave you alive as Wallachians. This pain is temporary. A generation from now, we rebuild. Under their rule, there is no rebuilding, only slow erasure. You have become what you fought against. No, I have become what is necessary. There is a difference. I do not see it anymore. Then pray you never have to make the choices I make. She leaves and Vlad returns to his preparations. Because there is one more piece to the strategy, one more element that will transform this from a defensive campaign into something that will be remembered for centuries. 3 kilometers outside Targovishte, his capital in a valley that any advancing army must pass through, Vlad has prepared 20,000 stakes. Tall, professionally crafted, arranged in concentric circles with the tallest in the center, creating a forest of wood that will soon become a forest of flesh. The bodies come from multiple sources: Ottoman prisoners from the winter raid, Bulgarian and Serbian collaborators who sided with the empire, Wallachian traitors identified by his intelligence network, and critically their families, wives, children, anyone connected to collaboration or surrender. This is the element that crosses from military necessity into something else, something darker. The women and children serve no strategic purpose as corpses. They could be imprisoned, exiled, enslaved. But Vlad needs something more than dead enemies. He needs symbols. He needs the Ottoman soldiers to see not foreign casualties, but reflections of their own families. The impalement is conducted with almost surgical precision. Stakes are rounded at the tip, oiled for smoother penetration. The angle bypasses major organs, initially allowing the victim to survive for hours, sometimes longer. Once hoisted, vertical gravity does the work, slowly pulling the body down inch by terrible inch, while the heart continues beating, the lungs continue gasping. It takes 3 days to complete the display. By the time it is finished, 20,000 human beings have been transformed into a message. A question posed in flesh and wood. A challenge issued not to Mehmed's army, but to their minds. June 1462. The Ottoman scouts crest the ridge overlooking the valley. They are experienced men, veterans of the Constantinople siege. They have seen the aftermath of major battles, witnessed city sacks, buried comrades. Nothing prepares them for what Vlad has built. The captain's name is Orhan. He is 35, has served the Sultan for 20 years, thought himself beyond shock. He reins in his horse at the ridge and stares. The valley stretches before him, 3 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide. At first in the distance, it looks like a forest. The brain tries to make sense of the vertical shapes, categorizes them as trees. Then the wind shifts and the smell arrives. Then the shapes resolve into detail. Faces, bodies, thousands upon thousands of bodies. The riders behind him begin to vomit. Others pray. One tries to turn his horse around, flee back the way they came. Orhan dismounts on shaking legs. He has to confirm this, has to look closely enough to report accurately. He forces himself to walk between the rows. The highest stakes hold Ottoman officers identified by their clothing. Surrounding them in rings are soldiers, civilians, elderly men, adolescent boys, and women, dozens of women. Some still wear the remnants of fine dresses. Others are positioned with children, families impaled together on the same stakes. Orhan recognizes one face. Ayşe, the merchant's wife from the border village. He knew her. She sold his unit bread last year. Her daughter's small body is lashed to the same stake, tiny arms spread like broken wings. He turns away and vomits until there is nothing left. Behind him, his men are losing their military discipline, some weeping openly, others muttering prayers. The messenger he sends back to Mehmed carries a simple report. 3 words. He has no soul. When the main Ottoman army arrives on June 17th, Mehmed rides at its head. He has heard the reports, discounted some of them as exaggeration, the way stories grow in retelling. But as his horse crests the same ridge as the valley opens before him, he understands that the reports were inadequate. Words cannot capture this. The smell hits first. Decomposition, human waste, blood, baking under summer sun. Then the visual, row upon row upon row. The engineering of it, the deliberate arrangement. High-ranking prisoners on the tallest stakes, families grouped together, bodies positioned for maximum visibility from every angle. Mehmed pulls his cloak across his face but does not look away. Cannot look away. This is a message addressed to him personally, written in the bodies of his subjects. He must read it completely. Behind him, the army spreads across the ridge, 80,000 men witnessing what one man has created. The psychological effect is immediate and devastating. Soldiers who have never questioned orders begin to whisper, "What kind of enemy does this? What will he do if he captures us, if he reaches our villages back home?" They are not looking at a defeated foe. They are looking at a preview of their own potential futures, their own families subjected to this. Mehmed calls his war council that evening in a tent positioned as far from the valley as possible. The smell still reaches them. Everything is contaminated, his generals argue. The Hawks demand immediate advance. They outnumber the Wallachians 8-1. They have superior siege equipment, cavalry, artillery. This is shock tactics designed to intimidate. They must not let it work. The cautious faction counters. Look at the men. Morale is shattered. Supply lines are already stressed from the scorched earth campaign. If they advance into the mountains, they fight on terrain that favors defenders. 10,000 Wallachians become 40,000 in mountain passes. Mehmed listens to both sides. Then he speaks. "You are both missing the point. This is not about numbers or logistics. This is about what kind of war we are fighting. Vlad has changed the battlefield. He is not fighting our army. He is fighting our willingness to continue. He has made victory meaningless. My Sultan, think, we advance. We take his capital. We install a new prince. Then what do we occupy for how long? At what cost? He has shown us he will burn his own country before surrendering it. He will kill his own people to deny them to us. Every village we take will be a charnel house. Every mile will cost us men not to his swords, but to disease, despair, desertion. But if we withdraw, we admit defeat. No, we admit that some victories cost more than they are worth, and we preserve our strength for wars that matter. He pauses, staring into the darkness toward where the forest of stakes stands. I broke the walls of Constantinople. I am the conqueror of the Second Rome. But this man has built something I cannot siege. He has fortified his people's minds against us. Not with walls, with horror. The order goes out the next morning. The Ottoman army will withdraw, not in panic, in military order. But they will withdraw. It is the first strategic retreat of Mehmed's career, and watching from the walls of Podanari, Vlad understands what he has accomplished. He has defeated the most powerful empire on earth not by destroying their army, but by making them calculate the count and choose to pay it elsewhere. But victory has its price. Vlad stands on the walls of his fortress and surveys what remains of Wallachia. The fields are ash. The villages are empty. His people are scattered into forests and mountains, traumatized, starving. He has saved the nation by destroying it, and the war is not over. Because Mehmed, unable to defeat Vlad with force, reaches for a more elegant weapon. He sends Radu. Radu enters Wallachia not with an army, but with a message. He is 32 now, refined by decades in the Ottoman court. Elegant, where his brother is brutal, diplomatic, where Vlad is absolute. His message is simple and seductive. I am not bringing stakes. I am bringing stability. Under my rule, the burning stops. The impaling stops. Markets reopen. Fields are sown, you know me. I am Wallachian by birth, Ottoman by culture. I bridge both worlds. Choose. The defections begin immediately. Boyar survivors who have spent years in terror see an opportunity. Merchants exhausted by war. Peasants who have watched their villages burned by their own prince in the name of defense. Vlad's response is to intensify the terror. He executes suspected defectors in public. Raids villages thought to be wavering, but every execution drives
Noble
more
assembly,
people toward Radu.
we gather to
Every
affirm
raid
our
proves
bonds
Radu's
and
message.
chart our
Vlad has
course.
become as
We
dangerous to his
stand
own
ready.
people as the Ottomans ever were.
Soldiers!
By autumn 1462,
The hour upon us.
Vlad
March
controls
with
only
courage,
Poenari
and
fortress
victory
and
will be
perhaps
ours.
3,000 loyalists. He conducts a final strategic assessment. 3 options: fight to the death, flee to Hungary, or negotiate with his brother. He eliminates option 3 immediately. Accepting Radu's rule means accepting Ottoman vassalage. Everything he has done, every body in that valley becomes meaningless.
Noble
Option 2,
overseas,
flee
your
to Hungary.
partners!
King Matthias has supported
Losing
him
me
before.
now,
We'll
but
take him in.
these
From exile,
strong!
perhaps rebuild, return when the political situation shifts. Option 1, die here. Become a martyr. Let history remember him fighting to the last. He chooses exile. Because a man alive can return. A man dead is only a story, and stories are rewritten by whoever holds power. But first he must secure his family. His wife Elisabetta stands beside him on the ramparts. She is 27, has been married to him for 7 years. She has watched him transform from a calculating prince into something else, something that frightens even her. Below them, fires burn in the valley. Radu's forces are closing in. The sounds of battle echo from the lower slopes. We leave tonight, Vlad tells her. Through the mountain passage, we can reach Hungarian territory in 3 days. Elisabetta does not answer immediately. She is watching the fires. When she speaks, her voice is distant. Do you remember our wedding? This is not the time. You made me a promise that you would protect our people, that everything you did would be for them. I have protected them. The Ottomans are gone. No, my love, the Ottomans are at our gates, and our people invited them in, because you became what you promised to protect them from. Vlad grips the stone parapet. I did what was necessary. You did what you learned in captivity. You became your captors. I became what survival demanded. And now I must decide what my survival demands. She turns to face him fully. Her eyes are clear, decided. If Radu takes me alive, I become a symbol. The wife of the impaler paraded through Constantinople used to legitimize Ottoman rule. I will not be that symbol. Then come with me. We flee together. To what years in exile, watching you plan your return, Building another army, creating another forest of stakes. I have seen enough horror, Vlad. I have been married to enough horror. She looks down at the river far below the Arges, churning white over rocks. I would rather the fish have my body than your enemies have my humiliation. Elisabetta, no. But she is already climbing onto the parapet. She speaks her final words without looking back. You counted everything in your calculations except this. You cannot save what you are willing to destroy. She steps into empty air. The fall takes long seconds. Vlad lunges forward, but there is nothing to catch except wind. The river swallows her without sound, just white water closing over something that is already gone. Vlad stands frozen on the wall. Around him, the fortress crumbles under assault. His men are dying, his kingdom is lost. And the woman who stood closest to him chose death rather than be saved by him. He flees that night through the secret passage alone, leaving behind the fortress built by bleeding noble women. Leaving behind the throne he killed thousands to keep, leaving behind everything except his life and the knowledge that he has failed. King Matthias of Hungary receives him not as an ally, but as a problem. Vlad is famous now, infamous. Stories of his cruelty have spread across Europe. To publicly support him risks alienating other Christian kingdoms, risks giving ammunition to critics who say Matthias is as barbaric as the Turks. So Matthias makes a calculation. He arrests Vlad quietly. Not in chains, not in a dungeon, but under comfortable house arrest in various castles and estates. A prisoner who can be produced if needed, hidden if convenient, but imprisonment requires justification. Matthias needs a reason to explain to other European courts why the great Christian defender is locked away. The solution arrives in the form of new technology. The printing press, pamphlets begin circulating through German-speaking lands, inexpensive booklets with woodcut illustrations. They show Vlad dining at a table surrounded by impaled victims calmly eating while executioners work around him. They describe tortures real and imagined. They inflate numbers, embellish details, transform calculated brutality into demonic sadism. Some of it is true, much of it is exaggeration. All of it is effective. Within months, Vlad has been transformed from a complex political figure into a printed demon. Dracula the Impaler, a monster who tortures for pleasure, a tyrant beyond redemption. Vlad, imprisoned in his comfortable cell, reads these pamphlets. He should be outraged. Instead, he laughs, a bitter, exhausted sound. They made me a demon, but at least demons are remembered. 13 years pass. Vlad ages from 31 to 44. He is allowed to marry a Hungarian noblewoman connected to the royal family, a political arrangement that produces children. He becomes something like domesticated, not tamed but contained, the sharp edges worn down by time and captivity. In 1475, the political situation shifts. Ottoman pressure on Hungary increases. Matthias needs capable commanders willing to fight Turks. Vlad is released, rehabilitated, married into Hungarian nobility, and aimed back at Wallachia like a weapon dusted off and reloaded. He returns to the throne in late 1475, now 44 years old. The Wallachia he finds is unrecognizable. Radu has ruled for 13 years, has established stability, has made peace with Ottoman vassalage. The country is no longer independent, but it is no longer ashes either. Vlad tries to implement his methods again. Order through terror, obedience through calculated brutality. But the world has changed, the people have changed. They remember the forest of stakes. They remember the burnings. When he executes a boyar for suspected treason, 10 more flee to Radu's faction. When he impales a thief, villages empty overnight. The same fear that once controlled them now drives them away. Because they have learned something too. Terror works until it becomes predictable. Once you know the tyrant will always choose the stake, you no longer calculate whether to obey. You calculate how to escape. December 1476. Vlad leads a force against Ottoman positions near Bucharest. It is a small engagement, barely worthy of the name battle. In the chaos, he is separated from his main guard. The historical record becomes unclear here. Some sources say Ottoman soldiers surrounded and killed him. Others suggest his own men struck him down in the confusion, whether by accident or design. The truth is probably simpler and sadder than either version. A man in his mid-40s, exhausted by decades of war, separated from his guards, overwhelmed by numbers. A thrust from behind or from the side, a blade finding the gap in armor, a fall from a horse, death in mud and confusion, unheroic and random. What matters is what happens after. His head is taken, preserved in honey to prevent decay during the journey. It travels south through territory he once raided, past villages he destroyed, across the Danube he once crossed in winter to spread terror. It arrives in Constantinople, in the city of Mehmed's greatest triumph, and is displayed publicly on a stake. The man who made impalement his signature, ending as an impalement victim. The symmetry is so perfect it feels literary, though it is only the irony of history. Mehmed, now 44 years old, comes to view the head in private. He dismisses his attendants, stands alone with what remains of the boy he grew up with, the man who made him retreat, the only person who truly understood the lessons they learned together. He speaks through the dead cannot hear, or perhaps they hear best of all. We played chess, do you remember? You always favored defense, pieces that seemed weak until they became predators. I should have learned that lesson better. The preserved face stares back, features recognizable but emptied of everything that made them Vlad. You asked me once if ends justify means. I said yes. I built an empire on that principle. You proved me right, and you proved me wrong. Mehmed circles the head, slowly studying it from all angles. You saved Wallachia for 5 years, but you destroyed it for 50. Your methods worked until they became your identity. The tool consumed the craftsman. He stops, facing the head directly. I conquered Constantinople. You conquered what memory legend? You wanted the Ottomans to fear you so completely they would leave Wallachia alone. And you succeeded, but you made your own people fear you just as much. So what did you save? The head offers no answer. The dead keep their conclusions. Perhaps that is all men like us can hope for. Not victory, not peace, just memory. The world will remember me as the conqueror of Constantinople, a great achievement. Cities fall to greater empires. That is the way of things. Mehmed leans closer, speaking almost in a whisper. But they will remember you as Dracula. Centuries from now, when both our empires are dust, more people will know your name than mine. So who won our war, old friend? Who really won? He straightens, signals for attendance, orders the head buried with respect in a location kept secret. Not out of fear, out of acknowledgement. Warrior to warrior, strategic mind to strategic mind. The years roll forward, decades become centuries. The Ottoman Empire expands and contracts like a breathing thing. Borders are redrawn, nations rise and fall, but in the lands around Wallachia, a name persists, Dracula, whispered to children who misbehave, invoked when people need a shorthand for absolute ruthlessness. The stories grow in the telling, accumulate, embellishments drift from history into legend. In 1897, an Irish novelist named Bram Stoker is researching Eastern European folklore for a book he is writing. He discovers a reference to Vlad Dracula, the Impaler Prince. The name has perfect resonance. Dracula, it sounds like dragon, sounds like demon. Stoker takes this historical fragment, infuses it with vampire legends, creates something entirely new. A count in a castle who drinks blood to sustain immortality. A monster who preys on women, seduces them, transforms them. The historical Vlad used women as weapons, impaled them, worked them to death. But he never drank blood except metaphorically, never seduced, never transformed anyone except in the sense that all tyrants transform their victims into corpses or survivors. But Stoker's version is more palatable. Horror that can be explained by supernatural curse is easier to digest than horror that springs from pure calculation. A vampire is fictional, safely contained in books. A man who engineers suffering as political communication that is too real, too close to what humans actually do. Hollywood amplifies the transformation. Bela Lugosi in a cape, Christopher Lee with fangs. The monster becomes aristocratic, elegant, even romantic in some versions. A tragic figure cursed by circumstances rather than a strategist who chose his methods deliberately. And then tourism. Bran Castle in Romania, which Vlad may have visited once or never, becomes Dracula's castle. Gift shops sell plastic fangs and vampire wine. Tourists pose for selfies on the ramparts wearing disposable capes, laughing. The site where real women once hauled real stone until their hands bled becomes a theme park attraction. This is the final transformation. From historical figure to fictional monster to marketable brand. The suffering that Vlad inflicted becomes entertainment. The women who died building Panera become props in a story about sexy vampires. The mothers impaled with their children become atmosphere in a gothic tale. Perhaps this too is irony, or perhaps it is just the way history works. The truth is too complicated, too morally ambiguous, too demanding of nuance. So we simplify it, make it supernatural, make it sellable. And in doing so, we complete what Vlad began. We turn human suffering into spectacle. We consume it. We buy the ticket and wear the cape and drink the wine. The question Vlad posed in that valley outside Targoviste in 1462 remains unanswered. When does strategic brutality become counterproductive terror? When does protecting people become destroying them? When does the tool consume the craftsman? These are not questions with simple answers. They are not questions that can be resolved by pointing to Vlad and calling him a monster. Because calling him a monster is comfortable. Monsters are other. They are not us. We do not have to examine what we would do in his position. A boy betrayed by his father, a hostage trained by his enemies, a prince without resources facing an empire, a man who learned that fear is architecture and built accordingly. Was there another path? Could he have protected Wallachia through diplomacy, through compromise by accepting vassalage and preserving his people at the cost of their independence? Perhaps. Other nations survived that way, bent but not broken, lost their sovereignty slowly instead of defending it absolutely. But Vlad believed in absolutes, freedom or death, independence or ashes, and he believed that teaching his enemies to fear him was the only language that would work. He was partially right. The Ottomans did retreat, but he was also catastrophically wrong. Because the same fear that drove away the empire drove away his own people, made his brother's offer of stability irresistible, turned his greatest strength into his fatal weakness. Mehmed was right. Vlad won the battle and lost something else, something he could never reclaim. Not his throne, not his reputation, but his humanity. The slow erosion that happens when you treat people as resources, when you turn suffering into strategy, when you become the tool you created. The forest of stakes stood for months after the Ottoman army withdrew. The bodies rotted, the stakes fell, rain and wind and time erased the physical evidence. But the psychological landscape remained altered. Generals studied the campaign. Military theorists analyzed the methods. The idea spread that terror strategically applied could defeat superior force. That fear was a weapon as potent as any sword. And they were right. And they were wrong. Terror works in the short term. It achieves immediate objectives. But it poisons everything it touches. The wielder most of all. This is what makes Vlad Dracula such an uncomfortable historical figure. He cannot be simply condemned or simply praised. He existed in a genuine dilemma. Small nation, powerful enemies, limited resources. He made choices. Those choices had consequences. Some of those consequences were exactly what he intended. Others destroyed everything he tried to protect. To call him a hero is to ignore the 20,000 bodies the women worked to death, the domestic terror, the erosion of everything that makes civilization worth defending. To call him a monster is to ignore the context, the impossible situation, the Ottoman Empire's very real threat, the alternatives that were even worse in some ways. So we are left with a man, neither hero nor monster, but something more complex and more true. A strategic mind that solved an impossible problem by becoming impossible himself. A defender who saved his nation by making it unrecognizable. A student who learned his lessons so well he became what he was taught to fear. And standing in Constantinople in 1477, Mehmed the Conqueror stares at his old chess partner's severed head and understands finally what their game was always about. Not winning, not conquering, but the question of what you are willing to sacrifice for victory, because you always sacrifice it. Always. The only variable is whether you admit it. We were both right, Mehmed whispers to the dead, and we were both wrong. And history will judge neither of us fairly because history deals in heroes and villains, and we were neither. He turns to leave, then stops. One final thought. Your people will tell stories about you for centuries, about the impaler prince, the man who drank blood, the monster in the castle. They will make you immortal. But they will forget the women. They will forget Maria and Elena and Aisha and Elisabetta. They will forget everyone who actually paid for your immortality. He walks away, leaving the head to be buried in secret, leaving the story to be told and retold and transformed until nothing remains of the truth except a name. Dracula, dragon, demon, defender, destroyer. All of these, none of these, just a man who made choices and lived and died with their consequences. And the rest is history, which is to say the rest is interpretation. The rest is debate. The rest is each generation looking at the same events and reaching different conclusions, because the question he posed has no single answer. When is terror justified? When does defense become destruction? What are you willing to sacrifice for survival? And when you have sacrificed everything, what remains worth surviving for? These are not historical questions. These are human questions. And Vlad Dracula, for all his distance from us in time and culture, remains disturbingly relevant because he lived those questions to their logical conclusion. And the conclusion is written in bodies arranged in valleys, in fortresses built by enslaved nobles, in wives who chose rivers over capture, in heads preserved in honey and sent as messages across empires. The conclusion is that there are no clean answers, only choices and consequences. Only strategies that work until they become your identity. Only weapons that you wield until they wield you. And perhaps that is the real lesson. Not that Vlad was right or wrong, but that the question itself demands we examine what we value more than survival. Because if survival is the only value, then any method becomes justifiable. Any horror can be rationalized. Any mountain of corpses can be explained as necessary. But if there are limits lines that should not be crossed, even in the name of preservation, then we must name them and defend them. Even when defending them costs us the thing we were trying to preserve. Vlad crossed every line, burned every bridge, sacrificed every principle on the altar of Wallachian independence. And in the end, Wallachia became an Ottoman vassal anyway. Not because he failed, but because his methods succeeded too well, made him impossible to follow, made his people choose stability over his particular brand of freedom. So the forest of stakes stands as a monument to human limits, to what happens when strategic thinking divorces itself completely from moral consideration. When efficiency becomes the only metric, when fear becomes the only language. Mehmed conquered Constantinople, and history remembers him as a great sultan. Vlad defended Wallachia, and history transformed him into a vampire. Both men believed ends justified means. Both men built their legacies on calculated violence. But one built an empire, and one became a ghost story. The difference matters, and the difference is this. Mehmed never lost sight of what he was building, never confused the tool with the purpose, never became the weapon he wielded. Vlad did. Somewhere between the Boyar banquet and the forest of stakes, between the golden cup and his wife's suicide, he stopped being a strategist defending a nation and became a force of nature, inhuman, unstoppable, alone. And that aloneness is what kills us. Not the Ottomans, not the boyars, not the military odds, but the isolation that comes from being willing to do what others will not. From crossing lines others hold sacred. From becoming the monster you need to be to fight monsters. Vlad saw this at the end, standing on Poenari's walls watching Elisabetta fall, realizing that he had calculated everything except the cost to the people he was trying to save. That you cannot protect what you are willing to destroy. That terror as a strategy works until it becomes your identity, and then it consumes everything, even love, even loyalty, even the point of fighting. But by then it was too late. The forest was already built. The bodies were already displayed. The message was already sent and received and interpreted and remembered. He had become Dracula, and Dracula could not become himself, could not step back from the precipice because he had already jumped, was already falling, would keep falling for centuries through legend, in fiction, in tourist attractions selling plastic fangs. This is what we inherit from him. Not a simple lesson about good and evil, but a complex question about means and ends. About what we preserve when we preserve only the shell of something and hollow out its meaning. About whether victory achieved through methods that destroy what makes us human is victory at all, or just another name for defeat. These questions do not have answers we can write down and memorize. They have only the struggle to hold multiple truths simultaneously. That Vlad faced impossible odds, that his methods were monstrous, that he saved Wallachia, that he destroyed Wallachia, that he was a brilliant strategist, that he was a cautionary tale, that he was human, that he became inhuman, that all of these are true, that none of these resolve into simple judgment. And standing in Constantinople in 1477 with his old friend's head displayed on a stake, Mehmed understood this, understood that their chess games were never about winning, were about the willingness to sacrifice pieces, and what you become when you sacrifice every piece except the king. And whether a king standing alone on an empty board can be called victory or just survival without purpose. Checkmate, Mehmed whispers. But which of us is checkmated? You are dead, I am alive. You are remembered, I am forgotten. You lost your kingdom, I gained an empire. You became a monster, I remained human. Or did I? These are the questions that matter. Not who won or lost, but what was wagered and what was lost in the winning. Not whether the methods were justified, but whether justification even applies when the consequences spiral beyond all calculation. Vlad Dracula, the Impaler Prince, the boy betrayed by his father, the strategic mind shaped by Ottoman captivity, the defender who became destroyer, the man who turned suffering into language, the king who died alone in the mud. All of these, none of these, just a name now, just a story, just a question that every generation must answer for itself. When terror is the only language that works, what do you say? And when you have said everything in that language, what remains to be said? And when the world looks at the first you built and recoils in horror, do you regret the horror or only that it failed to achieve what you intended? These are Vlad's questions, unanswered, unanswerable, passed down through centuries to us. We who buy the wine and wear the cape and make his suffering into entertainment. We who inherit a world where terror remains a tool of statecraft, where fear remains architecture, where the lessons he learned in Ottoman captivity are still being taught and learned and applied. We are not done with Dracula, and Dracula is not done with us, because the question he lived and died and killed for remains unresolved. How do you defend what you love without becoming what you hate? And when you have become it, when you have crossed every line and sacrificed every principle and displayed your enemies on 20,000 stakes, what looks back at you from the mirror, Mehmed knows the answer, has known since he was 10 years old playing chess with a captive Wallachian boy. What looks back is yourself, changed, hardened, efficient, successful, and utterly alone.